Welcome to In the Fire, a podcast for the young families of Chapelgate Presbyterian Church. Marriage and parenting are a wonderful blessing and are extremely rewarding, but they're also really hard and can leave us feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, and defeated. That's exactly why we started this podcast, to help families see how the gospel injects encouragement, comfort, and hope into the daily grind of our lives, and to remind you that you're never alone in the struggle. There is another in the fire.
Welcome back to In the Fire. My name is Rob Gicking, pastor of Young Family Ministry, host of this podcast, and I'll be your guide on this illustrious journey we're about to take, round 2 with Bob Perkins. Bob, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here.
You know, besides Dr. Paul Koistra, you are the only person who's made a 2-time appearance within the same season.
Wow. Well, that's great company.
We're really scraping the bottom of the barrel.
You're desperate now.
So, Bob, we've had you on the show before. There's really no need for us to dilly-dally. I'm going to go ahead and jump straight into the hard-hitting question. Last time, if you listeners recall, Bob is, a Renaissance man of sorts. He has lived in Baltimore. He currently lives in Pennsylvania. He has a wine import business from France and is into all kinds of things, runs the Timothy Foundation and many, many other things. So these hard-hitting questions will come as no shock.
Can't wait.
Bob, what is your Enneagram?
Pass.
Okay. When you're not importing wine from Bordeaux, is that how to say it?
Bordeaux.
Well, might as well correct me because I'm Bordeaux of talking about this. Let's move on. When you're when you're not importing wine from Bordeaux, what do you do with your time that's actually cool?
Well, in the summer, it's a lot of baseball, a lot of Phillies baseball, and now, of course, actually, I'm watching a lot of Orioles baseball too. So I'm incredibly conflicted because I've been here, 17 years and in Philadelphia, and I've become a huge Phillies fan. But you can take the boy out of Baltimore, you'll never take the Baltimore out of this boy.
Yeah, the O's are forced to be reckoned with this year.
They are really fun to watch.
All right, next question. Besides France, what do you think is the worst country on earth?
Oh gosh, that is a terrible question because France is awesome. I don't have a worst country on. I haven't been to them all.
Oh, that's true.
So I don't know.
It'd be hard to say.
Yeah,
and that's not really a bucket list item for someone to say.
No.
I'd like to visit all the worst ones.
All the worst ones. Where can I find the worst country?
All right, last one. Is it true that the Timothy Foundation is named after Tim Beshner?
It is not, but it could have been.
It could have been.
Yes.
Shout out to Tim Beshner.
Shout out.
A friend and a scholar. He's a good guy. So, Bob, the reason I ask about the Enneagram is, of course, we're here to talk about one of your books, Building a Vision for Your Life, Discovering Your Core Motivator and Why It Matters. And you may not know this, but it was written by you.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that.
So this is, well, maybe let's just start with this. How would you describe it in as brief as you can? What is the core motivator?
Your core motivator is why you do what you do, the way you do it. It's everything. It is the lens through which you see the entire world. It's how you see your own life, but it's also how you see everything else. It is not personality. It is not a personality test. It is much deeper than that, and we can get into.
Yeah. So I find this to be very fascinating. How did you come up with this? Yeah. Let's start there. How did you kind of wrap your mind around this? And then we're going to dive into what the core motivators are and all of that. But I want to just hear a little bit of the backstory. How did you come up with core motivator?
First and foremost, I believe the Lord gave it to me, that it was not, that I came up with it. I mean, I did, but I really think that just the Lord gave it to me. I had graduated from Covenant Seminary in 1994 and then was Ontario director for Young Life in '96. And my boss at the time, a wonderful, wonderful man named Hal Merwald, who was a phenomenal leader and a great, great guy. He gave the management team the Harvard Business Review summary article of the book Built to Last, Collins. And in that book, Collins talks about identifying core values for your company. And when you have the values for the company first, then you can do a vision for the company. That's kind of that's Collins' whole thing, really. But what struck me as I read the article was that while I think that's true for organizations, it's for individuals, it's core motivator. And that's why I say the Lord gave it to me, because it just struck me that way. Now, I had also, I mentioned the seminary part because part of the time in seminary was understanding creation theology, that we are created in the image of God. We are image bearers. And that as image bearers, we bear that very nature of God in us. And so that sense of there's something deep in us that is not personality, that is not learned or formed by the world around us, but that is inherent in our DNA, in our birth, because it's the image of God in us, is what really came together for me. And I was excited about this and faxed the article, because that's what you did back in the day, to a friend, and we met for a weekend to talk about it. And I actually said to him, I think my core motivator is evangelism. Now, we had no idea at the time what core motivators was. It was just an idea. And he said, no, your core motivator is relationships. And I said, no, it's not. And I really was insulted. And I did not like that idea at all. Let's put it that way. And so we just argued and argued all day. By dinner, we just weren't even talking about it. I mean, just weren't. And so we went to see the first Austin Powers movie, which happened to be playing. And
yeah, baby.
Yeah. And I laughed a lot and walked out of the theater and said, I think you're right. And if I don't know who I am, what are the chances most people know who they are? Mm-hmm. And that was really the beginning. I mentioned it to a friend, and this idea, because I got pretty excited about it. And this particular friend said, I need to have you help me with my business, and I want to understand my core motivator. And I said, well, look, I'm in full-time ministry. I don't do consulting, on the side. And he said, if you don't help me, I'm going to lose this business and I won't be able to support you anymore. And I said, when do we start?
That's right.
And so he became my first client, and then he told somebody else. And before I knew it, I just had this steady stream of clients. And over the next 6 years, really built that consulting. And at about the 100 client mark, I said, I see the same 7 core motivators repeating. We're going to codify this and say, here are the 7. And eventually I transitioned out of Young Life and to do this full time.
So at that point, that's pretty, I don't think I've recognized the timeline of that before. So at this point, you're coaching, you're consulting, you're helping these people, but you hadn't quite nailed down the exhaustive list of core motivators. There were many, I suppose.
Well, I had no idea, and so I said to the first guy, I said, just write your life history, and we'll try and figure it out. And he did, and I couldn't have had a better first client. Again, the Lord in all this, but couldn't have had a better first client because his life history read, my best friend in 4th grade was, my best friend in 8th grade was, my best friend in, and I said, the best friend jumps off the page. Your relationships core motivator too, which is what we called it at the time. Didn't have the interesting about that is he fought me on it and said, "No, I'm not," which was exactly what
Which
I
is
had
exactly
done.
what you did.
And I remember him saying, "I don't have any. I'm not good at them, and my wife won't let me." I say, "Wait, we're gonna do this in reverse order, you know." But it turned out his entire business was built on his ability to connect with his clients, and the entire practice was built that way. Now the next guy was not a relationships coordinator, but it was the same thing. So we went looking for. You write your life history. We went looking for what is the core thing that's deep here, but not having any idea what we were looking for. I knew this because most of my early clients were men, and they owned their own business, and because they could afford it. I mean, I have a really skewed sample set because of who can afford it.
The coaching.
The coaching, yeah. And the process, so they would write their life history, and we would go looking, and I would say to them, first of all, what do you think your core motivator is? Now I learned that the hard way, by the way, because we would, in the early clients, I would get to the end and say, this is your core motivator, and they'd say, oh, well, I knew that already. And I would think, no, you didn't. So then I asked the clients first, what do you think your core motivator is? And I write it down. Because when we got to the end, it was never that, which is another thing worth talking about, is that almost no one knows their core motivator. And there is that big aha moment. And most people don't like their true core motivator, and they are living out of their second, and they've lived that for a long time. But anyway, I would say to these guys, what do you think your core motivator is? And they would say to me, it is success, it is money, it is sex, it is accomplishment. I mean, all these things that I say, no. Because your core motivator is the reflection of the nature of God in you. And God does not care about success or money or sex for that matter. I mean, those are not nature of God. That's the thing we were looking for. We're looking for the nature of God in us. And so it meant that we had to just keep digging and digging and digging. And most of the time in very uncomfortable ways. You have to turn the spotlight on the inside and say, no, this is who I really am, and it's who I've been running from.
I'm listening to you, and I'm processing, because having gone through this process myself, I do find that everything you just said was true for my experience. Sitting down, and we'll talk about this in a second, but unlike maybe an Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or something else where you do take a test, there's sort of a standardized testing, and you're answering questions either on a scale, very unlikely to extremely likely, or yes or no. This is not done that way. It's actually done by you sitting down and writing your life history. You kind of referenced that with your friend, and going through and writing your life history. And the best way to write your life history is to not have read the book. Is that right?
Yeah.
So you don't actually. So if you're actually listening to this and you're super curious about what your core motivator might be, you should stop, pause this, go write down everything that's happened to you from birth towards the age you are that you think is important, and then send it to Bob Perkins, and he'll charge you a fine fee of $10,000. You will fund his retirement.
Don't send me your life history. A couple of points about that. Number one, you just gave more information than we give when we ask someone to write their life history. We tell them only write your life history in less than 20 pages and nothing else. Nothing else. And that's part of the process. But I'll also tell you that we are working on an online test.
Oh boy.
And we are within, I think, 6 months to a year of having that test done. It will probably not be definitive, but it will be 95%.
Wow.
Sure. But here's the thing that's going to be really different about this test is that all of the other tests say answer your first response, whatever comes to your mind first, and do it quickly. It is not going to be that. We're going to ask you to really think hard about each question.
Yeah, I would say that having gone through the others and then done the core motivator, the deep dive, the self-reflection required for this is of a different level. Let's put it that.
Yeah.
So let's talk through what these core motivators are.
Sure.
We have 7 of them now.
Yeah, 7 core motivators.
And they actually go into different categories, which I'll let you explain in a second. But I'm gonna read them off for our listeners, which is relationships, which you've mentioned.
Yeah, which we've changed that word. So there
We're
will be a
updating.
new version 2 of the book will be out hopefully the end of the summer, and a number of things have changed in it. One is that we changed the word relationships to connecting. It is connecting core motivator now.
Okay.
And that word, the reason we changed it is because that word much more closely resonates with the people who are that core motivator.
Are the other ones the same? The others are the same. All right, I'll continue. So we have connecting and belonging.
Yeah.
Those are 2. Then the next are caring, serving, and giving.
Yeah.
And the last 2 are creating and perfecting.
Yeah.
And they go in 3 categories, don't they?
They do. So the connecting and belonging core motivators are people for people's sake, meaning that those people are able to live out of their core motivator without any tasks associated with it. I'm connecting core motivator is one-on-one, energized by one-on-one. So Rob, doing this podcast with you, just sitting here talking, this is the easiest thing in my life to do. It energizes me because it's one-on-one. Put me in a group and it takes a lot of energy for me to be energized in a group. But those are both people for people's sake, no task needed. For creating and perfecting, those are task core motivators with no people needed. So you want these guys who can write computer code in a cubicle by themselves all day, then they don't need any people. That's a creating or perfecting core motivator. They are happy, just fine to not have people. The middle group is the interesting one, the caring, serving, and giving, because those are actually tasks directed at people. And this has been one of the many ahas in this, that they think they're people, and they're not. The caring, serving, and giving core motivators are actually about a task. But that task needs a person on the other end of it. You can't care for this table. You can't serve this table. You can't give to this table. You need a person on the other end of that task. But it's a task nonetheless. They tend to get in trouble when they are perceived as people, and then they are discovered for being the task people they really are. I have had several pastors who have been clients. They've all been either serving or caring. And what happens is they get hired, they engage the people, they're good at it, they're caring for the people or they're serving the people. But there comes a point where the people realize, I'm just a task on the other end of this equation for them. And then those people turn on them. And when they turn on them, it's a really short period of time before they get fired.
Wow. So I'm just, the 3 categories again were people for people's sake.
Yes.
Task for task's sake.
Yes.
And then tasks directed at people or
Yes.
for people. So you're in that first grouping, the relationship, the connecting and belonging, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so people for people's sake.
Yeah.
So you want to just be with people, and
Yeah.
and you know, it's interesting because the words can be kind of confusing sometimes, but you care for people and you invest in people and you serve people, but it's all about the peopling. It's the relationship you're building, the connection that you have with that person. So then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the creating and perfecting, and a Chapelgate individual who's gone through this is Tim Beshner, and Tim is a creating core motivator. And it sounds sometimes, and be cautious as you listen and process this at home. One is not better than the other. Would you agree with that, Bob?
Well, no, connecting is the best.
Yeah.
But,
Well, besides you and how great you are at connecting.
no, of course not, because it's a reflection of the nature of God in us.
Yes.
And so we don't say that one nature of God is better than the other. It's just not.
And so because of that, because we can often, especially in the Christian circles, right, we can elevate people over task. But I mean, think about the Old Testament all through, and the New Testament all through, we see that God raises up people who care for people, and he raises up people who do great projects. I mean, I think about like Ezra and Nehemiah, for example. It's like, it'd be hard to be, if you were a super relational, you know, connecting, belonging person, to be Nehemiah. That probably wouldn't have checked out very well. Not that we can guess per se, but so Tim is a creating core motivator, and I've seen it as we've worked together for the past 2.5 years in his ability to take on tasks that have multiple levels of intricacy and detail and minutia, and not lose his mind. Where I would have gotten extremely bored, frustrated, it would have actually turned out to be stressful for me, and then I would have just said, you know, I'm done with this. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Tim's able to walk that through start to finish because he's actually motivated by the task.
Yes.
Yeah.
Energized by it.
Yes.
Let's go through the list one more time.
Yeah.
But in this context, to just be clear that every core motivator is a nature of God. God is a connecting God. He is a belonging God. I mean, by definition, 3 in 1. But you know, we see Jesus. Jesus, you know, he has his team, but he also has one-on-one. You know that John says, "I'm the disciple that Jesus loved." I mean, it's crazy, but it's true that God is a caring God. That God is a serving God. Jesus comes as a servant leader. God is giving. He gives his only Son. He is creating God. God creates the world, and he's perfecting. He is perfect. So each core motivator is reflection of the nature of God in us. And it really is what separates this from everything else. Everything else is really grounded in humanism. I've actually never said that before, but as I think about it, that's really true. It's all in the human experience.
Right.
And what energizes me about this is that it's centered in God.
And so in that sense, to bring it back full circle, we can be very confident that regardless of what our core motivator is, it's part of our image bearing. It's part of that imago Dei that we have as God's children. So again, you know, we have to be careful against saying, well, this part of God is more valuable than that part of God. We would never say it about God, so we can't say it about the people either.
Yeah, and it's body of Christ, right? We all need each other, and we need what each other brings to the body of Christ for core motivators. I need the perfecting core motivators to say to me, no, this is what perfect looks like over here. I don't see it. I'm like, let's just, you know, get stuff done here. But I need them, or serving. I mean, we can talk about first, second, and last a little bit later maybe, but serving is my last. I need the serving people to say to me, Bob, this is where you need to serve. Because I'll never see it.
Right. Well, it's interesting. So I myself am, at least for now, a caring core motivator.
No, you are.
Well, do they change is a question that I wanted to make sure. I get that question a lot.
That's good. Yeah, I get it too. They do not change. It's the nature of God in you. It's not changing.
Mm-hmm. So have you had people misdiagnose themselves?
Well, misdiagnose themselves, yes. I have never been wrong diagnosing, and if I was, I would certainly never tell you.
That's right. Not on a podcast. Not in this forum.
Not heck no. I think we've had, and I mean only a handful of times, we've had people come out of the process and say, I'm still not sure. But boy, that's been not 10 times out of probably 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the misdiagnosis at the first part. So going back a little bit, you ask people to write down what they think they are, and then they, you go through a process with them. You find that most men fall into a particular, they guess wrong, right?
Oh yeah. So most men want to be creating, and because that's the only one that sounds kind of cool to men.
Yeah, creating's cool.
Yeah, I get to build stuff.
Build stuff. I don't care about people. I'm cool like Tim Beshner. Yeah. So I thought I was that.
Yeah. So did I, by the way.
Yeah.
That's what I would have said if we had that word.
Because when I think about things that, when I think about life and what's been important to me, especially in a context like this, I think I'm naturally drawn at first glance to talk about accomplishments, achievements, the things that I either was part of or led or accomplished. And so when I was thinking that way, I was kind of like, well, I guess I'm a creating core motivator. After all, look at all I've created, right? Look at all the tasks that I've done. But this is where I think it gets really, really fascinating. And this is why, to me, the core motivator is so valuable, because it actually was that life story that ended me on caring. Because I wasn't motivated by the task. In other words, if I had accomplished all that, but it hadn't have benefited anyone, if there was nobody there who benefited, who was cared for by these accomplishments, it wouldn't have mattered. And that actually was apparent for me looking at sports as a child. I remember writing this my life story, and I remember there was a season in my like 5th and 6th grade span of life where I was the last batter in like 4 baseball games in a row. And I struck out 4 games in a row to end the game, and we lost. And that stood out to me. And I wrote that in the story, and I realized the reason I wrote it in the story is because, and I think this is where we realized it wasn't creating at all, it was caring, because I said, listen, better me than them.
Oh, gosh.
Because now they don't have to deal with that.
Yeah,
they don't have to get in the car and cry all the way home and know that they let everyone down.
Yeah.
I still offered that, and it was so interesting. But these things that I do, if I don't see how they are benefiting someone or some people group, I have zero interest. This podcast is a perfect example. I got to Chapelgate and looked around at all these young families with kids hanging all over them and said, there's no way that they're making it to a 9:00 Sunday school and then sticking around for a 10:30 worship service. I got to figure out a way, something that I can do that will help them chew on the truth of God's word and apply it to their lives in a practical way that they can do on demand at their own time. And that isn't just self-help but all of a sudden I got this task, this giant project that was laid on my plate. And I have had so much fun doing this for folks, because to me, this is something I can do to care for them. And here's the best part. I just find other people who are smarter and better looking and more intelligent and have more to offer. And I just get them and I sit down in a basement with them and I ask them, what's the deal with the core motivator? And in doing so, I actually I'm living out my core motivator.
You're getting to care for people. Yeah.
So what would you say, I want to talk about kind of how each of these manifests themselves in sort of a high level way, because people are listening at home and, they're very self-interested, self-absorbed people, not me. They are, but we all want to know, what is my core motivator, right? So how would you walk us through a little bit?
Yeah.
We know our categories: people for people's sake, task for task, and then task directed at people. But walk us through a little bit of the distinctions you see and hit on the sin, because that's also a huge piece.
Yeah, so with each core motivator, there is the nature of God in us, but each core motivator is also corrupted by sin, because sin has corrupted all of creation. And so sometimes it's easiest to see your core motivator in its sinful manifestation. So let's walk through them. Connecting core motivators are one-on-one, energized by one-on-one. They typically want a best friend. The negative sinful manifestation is rejecting. They also reject very, very quickly. I mean, in milliseconds.
What does that look like? What does it mean to reject?
It means that when they meet someone, they connect or reject instantaneously. They know it instantaneously. They've learned to navigate that, to live, to not just be jerks, but we used to say that one of the negative of connecting was random acts of jerkness, and it was random acts of jerkness because they so instantly reject that it looks like jerkness. I'm not sure jerkness is a word, but you know what I mean. Belonging is groups and teams. They are energized by having a group together, having a team together. They don't have to actually do anything. They just have to be together. The sinful manifestation is people pleasing. They will do anything to have people accept them into the group.
So the belonging, in distinction to the connecting is sort of one-on-one.
Is one-on-one.
The belonging is I'm part of a team. I'm part of this group. So this, maybe the social circle that I'm after, or but we see this with people, right?
Yeah.
One of the best ways to get someone excited about serving is a T-shirt. Have you noticed that at church? If you have a cool T-shirt that says something like, kids ministry volunteer, or like kids ministry hero, some people get really excited about that. I don't. It's a T-shirt.
I don't.
And I'm wearing a collar to church because I'm a good Christian boy.
Yes, well, that's right. Well, you're professional. You're a professional Christian. Professional Christian. Yeah.
That's right. I'm a professional Christian.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna get me in trouble. All right, keep going. So we got connecting and we have belonging.
And then caring, it would be next. And caring core motivators are attracted to needy people. And they will find the needy people. They will seek out the needy people. One of the tough questions that I wind up asking is your spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend, are they needy? And if they are, if you've dated a lot of needy girls, you're probably a caring core motivator. And the sinful manifestation is arrogance. It says, I know what's best for you. I will take care of you. And there is a real difference in taking care of someone and caring for someone. And caring core motivators have to navigate that difference really, really well.
This is where I think the rubber really met the road for me, because I looked back at my life, and as I started to process this caring core motivator aspect of me, I looked back and I started to recognize that in relationships that I'd had, is particularly ones that went sour, I had started in a position where I was able to offer much to a particular individual. And that person over time actually grew in maturity. Maybe they grew in their faith. Maybe they grew in their confidence. And I didn't know what to do with that person to a degree. And of course, this is happening. This is retrospect, right? In the moment, I'm not thinking, why is this person being so weird to me now? We've been close for a long time. Now they're acting like that. Well, actually, it was just as much me as it was them, because I didn't realize that part of what I was attracted to was that they needed me. And we see this in leadership, and I don't want to make this a leadership podcast, but I think this is one of the most dangerous parts of leadership, especially in the church. You're in a position where you're up front and you're preaching or you're teaching or you're sharing, and you act as a spiritual guide for people. You provide them with insights into God's word, and you care for them in their times of sadness, and you're there at the celebrations. You're a really integral part of, if you're doing your job right, an integral part of their life. What does it look like scripturally to say, I don't just care for the obviously needy, but I recognize that what the Bible teaches me is that every single person is needy, including myself? Well, that changes a lot, because if you're a leader who's thinking, I have a lot to offer my congregation, you're not pastoring for the Lord, and you're not pastoring for them. You're actually pastoring for yourself, because you're finding your ego satiated, at least temporarily, in the applause of man. And that is the arrogance, isn't it? Yeah.
The easiest to tell a caring core motivator is when you read the life history and it says, I was the best at this. I was the best at this. In high school, I was the best. And you think, oh my gosh, the arrogance is jumping off the page. It's probably a caring core motivator.
Yeah. So after caring, we move on to
Serving. So where caring is attracted to needy people, serving is attracted to people's needs. And they're very different things. Again, it's a task, but it sees a need and it just wants to get in and serve. These are the people that you want on moving day. They actually love that, and so they want to help, to serve. The sinful manifestation is pride, and it says, "Look what I do. I'm the better person here." And again, that will jump off a page also. They tend to use people. My very first serving client, I can remember that back to, 20 some years ago. And we were going through his life and on and on and on. And finally, he just had enough. And he said, fine, you want to know my sinful manifestation? I use people. And he happened to be in a Bible study that I was leading. And I said, you use me? He said, if I wouldn't get anything out of your Bible study, we wouldn't be friends. Now, you got to understand, to a connecting core motivator, that is anathema. I mean, that is, whoa, really? Yeah, and the reason they use people is because in their minds they have to have this. They have to have the scale balanced. They want to serve so much. It's so in them. It's so who they are. Everything about them wants to serve, but then they feel weak because they're just this pathetic guy who's out serving everybody. So they'll use people to kind of balance the scales in their own minds and their own emotions.
That's one of the more fascinating dynamics, I think.
Yeah, the serving core motivator has become one of the really interesting ones that we understand a lot more, have understood a lot more over time. It is the pride. It is serving core motivators tend to be exercise freaks, and by the way, and they tend to almost never cry. You ask a serving core motivator, how many times in your life have you cried? And if they say 0 or maybe once, this is probably a serving core motivator.
Why? Well, I don't understand. I'm not seeing the connection there.
Because they hold discipline as their highest value, and they have disciplined their whole lives, and so they, including disciplining their emotions.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend whose wife died, and he said, "Yeah, I didn't cry at my wife's funeral." I'm like, "How's that possible?"
Dude, I'm crying for this man.
How is this possible? But it's possible because he's a serving core motivator.
Wow.
Yeah,
that is very interesting. So we're still in the tasks directed towards people. We've done caring, we've done serving. So next is giving.
Right. So giving core motivator is interesting. So they ask the question, what can I give? So where the caring core motivator says, who can I care for? The serving core motivator says, what can I do for you? The giving core motivator says, what can I give? And it's not, to be clear on this, it's not just financial. It can also be advice. One of my first, but the giving is the core motivator we've had the least number of clients for, which is interesting in itself. But one of my early clients was a giving core motivator, and he had been head of a financial department at a big bank, and he got fired, and then we met, and he was giving his boss advice all the time, and his boss just got sick of it. And he got fired. And so one of the cool things was to find him the job where that advice giving was really appreciated and actually what he was getting paid for, which we did. And then I was having a follow-up lunch with him because now I had this big job and I wanted to I was trying to sell him, pitch him on working with his new team. And at the end of breakfast, he handed me $100. And I said, "What is this?" He said, "Well, your time is valuable." And I said, "Listen, this was a sales call. I'm trying to pitch you, but you can't not give." I said, "I'm taking your $100. You just bought yourself a coaching session. We're going to follow this up next week."
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is, I think, the most rare as well. Just I like to play backseat driver, with this stuff. And, I meet people and I have a particular friend in mind who I really think is probably a giving core motivator. And he's one of the kindest guys that I've ever met in my life. But it is, and here's when I saw it. I actually saw it. He actually sent me some money when Kate was living in the hospital, just because it was something he could do for me. It was something he could do to say, like, "Hey, I know you're going through a hard time, and this is a way I can provide for you. I can give to you." And then I saw it. We had a bunch of kids over at their house, and just the way that he interacted with these kids. I mean, it was like there was nothing that was off limits for these children. It was like, if you want to build a stick fort, I will go get the sticks and bring them to you. And if you want to light it on fire, I'll get the lighter fluid and the matches. And then if you want to call the fire, I'll get the phone. It was like he just was, everything he was doing was to provide or give for another person. And it's interesting, you and I've talked about this, that providing is not in and of itself a core motivator, even though God provides, because I think it really would fall into maybe all three of these tasks for people, but I think especially the giving.
Yeah. The giving. I have a great friend who can't not give. I mean, it's in one sense it's great, but I've had to say to him, it hurts our friendship if you always pay for lunch. You got to let me be part of this too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is a good place, and I know we still have two more to talk about. This is a good place to even just reflect on what you said earlier, which is these core motivators are part of our image bearing. Yeah. This is part of God's character, if you will, that he puts on display throughout all of human history and in his people. As children of God, those who believe in Christ, we have been made new, and so we ought to continue to refine and focus on these ways that God is through us, in and through us, presenting himself to the world. But as we know, I mean, it doesn't take long to look at any of Paul's letters and wow, like there's some stuff going on in my heart and in my mind that's just wrong. It's not actually honoring to God. I especially love the idea that there's really nothing I can do out of a pure motive.
Yeah.
And so even as I care and even as you connect and as Tim creates and for you guys at home, whatever it is that your core motivator is, there's going to be times where your core motivator is done in self-interest. And be aware of that. Use it as an opportunity to remember this. Remember that you're not perfect, that God loves you, and that in those moments, rather than feel cruddy about yourself, it's an opportunity for you to remember just how much God connects with you, just how much he cares for you, just how much he is creating a new person out of you, and how much he's perfecting you. And Philippians is so good right now, right? I know this, that he who began a good work is going to bring it to completion. But we're not there yet. And so this is not an excuse. Sorry, I'm a little bit on a rant here, but this is not an excuse to say, well, I'm a caring core motivator. It's just what I do.
Yeah.
No, that's abusive. It's manipulative. And there's no place for that kind of mentality in the body of Christ. You're a caring core motivator, and sometimes the sinful side of you comes out. So Rob, what do? I take that to Jesus, to the author and perfecter of my faith, who will never cast me out, never leave me. And I say, Lord, even in my best days, I'm doing things for me and not you. Forgive me. And he says, I do. Now get up and try again, and I'm with you. So,
yes,
if these mics were handheld, we could drop them, but they're boomed, so that would be an expensive mistake. Move us on. Task for task's sake. Let's start with creating.
Yeah, creating people. They see the world through what can I make and what do I create? How do I? I was with a guy, and who I've known for a long time, and we were talking about core motivators, and he wasn't really getting. We were just talking. We weren't. we sat down for dinner, and all of a sudden he looks at me and he says, "Fort." And I said, "What?" He said, "Fort. When I was a kid, every day in the summer we got up and built a fort. And my whole life is building forts." It's like, well, that's probably creating core motivator, because you see the world through the lens of what can I make today. The sinful manifestation of creating is judgmentalism. And they are, you didn't make it the way I think you thought you should have. So they can be very judgmental.
Who's judgmental now, Tim? Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting. The fort idea, because again, for someone like you or me, you would have built a fort because someone that you were connecting with said, "I want to build a fort today."
Right.
Great. We're together. That
Right.
sounds good to me. I would have built a fort because maybe my younger brothers were like, "Oh, it'd be really cool if we built a fort, but we can't on our own because we're too weak." And I would have said, "Big brother's here."
Yeah.
Like a hero. And I would have built them the fort. But this guy's just every day.
Just that's what you do every day.
Wake up, I build a fort. Now, this is a natural point to ask this question, which is, does my core motivator determine career paths?
Well, that's a way more complex question. The answer for right now is the goal should be to live out of your core motivator every day. You leverage and lean into who you were created to be. And you want the career that aligns best with that. So it's not necessarily the job, but one of the principles of Vision for Your Life, and by the way, Vision for Your Life, that's what the book is called. It's what the practice is called. It's not core motivator for your life. It's about a much bigger thing than just core motivator. It's saying, what is the vision for your whole life? Now, it's grounded in your core motivator. It starts with who are you created to be, but there's a lot bigger sense of that vision for your life. And one of the Vision for Your Life principles is build your job into your life, not your life into your job. Most of us build our lives into our jobs, meaning that we get our job first and then we figure out how I can do everything. My entire life becomes about my job. And I'm saying that paradigm needs to be reversed. We need to say, who am I? What do I want my life to look like? And then figure out what job fits into that life picture. Again, this is another perhaps longer conversation, but when we ask the question, what do you really want your life to look like? Very few people can really answer that. I did a thing where I gathered 25 guys on a Saturday morning and handed out a piece of paper that just was a daytimer. Well, you don't know what daytimer is, but it was a page with just 6 a.m. to midnight down the left-hand column. And I said, if money was no object, how would you spend your day? Every day. Not one day. Not just, this is my one day, I'm going to do this. Every day of your life, money is no object. Fill in that. 15 minutes later, there were 24 blank pages. One guy for whom money was not an issue and who was doing exactly what he could do if money was no object, he was the only one that filled it out.
He just pulled out his actual,
said,
daytimer
this
and
is
just
what I'm doing
copied
because
it.
this is what I do. Yeah. 24 blank pages. We don't know. We have never really stopped to think about it. We're a little off here and we need to make sure we finish on perfecting, but we mostly, graduate from school, we get a job, we get married, we have kids, we watch the kids graduate, we retire, and we repeat with our grandchildren. And that's how we think about our lives. And I'm saying that's backwards. We need to think about, who has God made me? Who has he made me to be, and what has he called me to do? And to define that first, and then say, okay, now where does job and career and all these other things fit into it?
I think that's so important because it is very easy to sort of follow the you brought up school, right? School, I wake up, someone tells me where to go when, and then what to do, and then I switch through the subjects, and then I get sent home with homework that I'm supposed to accomplish. And we can fall into the trap, if you will, of expecting life to sort of be our taskmaster. So I just do what the next thing I'm told to do is. But God has designed us. He's given us gifts and abilities. He's given us personalities. He's also given us limitations. And that's been, for me, one of the more, as of late, I mean, no surprise, I have 4 little limitations at home. But that really is to say God's limitations on my life are a blessing. In America, we think any limitation is an obstacle that I'm meant to overcome or circumnavigate. But sometimes God puts limits to help us be who we are.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great point. You know, part of this is a prayerful discovery of who God has made you to be. And from there, you then begin to ask the secondary questions. So what should I do with my time? How should I spend? How should I use my gifts and abilities? Maybe I have a great mind for math. Okay, so there's a lot of jobs that use math. That's a skill. But depending on your core motivator, you might find there are certain jobs that are really exciting for you, and other jobs with math that would drain the life out of you.
That's exactly right. The whole idea of career is you are going to do your job out of your core motivator, whether you are intentional about it or not. That sense of intentionality is what becomes so freeing. Because when you can be intentional, then you are free to be who you are. And now you can be really successful. Whereas you'll never be successful if you're fighting who you are.
Yeah, and that's scary, right? Because again, going back, sometimes I wish I wasn't who I am. Right? That's everybody. That's every human being I've ever met. Nobody's ever been 100% all the time happy with who they are, because there are parts of me that I just downright don't enjoy.
Yeah, of course.
That maybe that aren't great for my marriage, or aren't great for my children, or aren't great for my own mental health, for goodness sake. You know, like it's hard to be a broken person living in a fallen world, and yet this is who I am. And Jesus loves me.
This I know.
So you got to wrestle with that. All right, so let's go.
Yeah,
because they would be furious if we didn't get all 7. This last person.
Yes, they should be. So the perfecting core motivator sees the world through the lens of how it can be perfect. They ask not what can I make. They ask how can I make it perfect. They typically cannot write their life history because they cannot figure out how to write it perfect. There are a couple little interesting things about perfecting core motivators which are telltale. One is they tend to be late always because they can't leave the last thing until it's perfect. So by the end of the day, boy, they're really backed up because they have not been able to leave anything. They're late to the next meeting, I have a perfecting core motivator client right now, and he's late to everything. And it just, anyway, there's the other thing with perfecting core motivators is they typically do not have anything on their walls because they cannot figure out what the perfect thing is to hang on their walls. I mean, you can walk into, I walk into an office building and go around. I've done this. I mean, I've had this happen. I'll go, the CEO or whoever has called me to come in, and he says, first I'd like you to meet the team. And I kind of go office to office and meet them. And I get to the one where there's nothing on their walls. I'm going to go, well, I know what that is.
Yeah.
But they see the world through how it could be perfect. It's very difficult for them to, we just had a guy at Timothy Foundation who, they have to give sermons. And he called me, 2 days before he was supposed to give his sermon and said, I just can't. It's not done. I can't. I said, no, you're perfecting core motivator. It'll never be done because it'll never be perfect. You're given it.
Yeah.
So, and in that case, by the way, the sermon was not great. But after we talked about it, and this is why we do it for a lot of reasons. Number one, most importantly, that they would learn to see the Christ-centeredness of every passage. But for him, what he saw was, he saw his perfecting in how the anxiety he had in not having this perfect sermon. So interesting.
It is. So before we dive into that, what is the sinful manifestation?
Perfectionism.
Perfectionism. Okay.
Yeah. Now, by the way, not only is the core motivator a reflection of the nature of God, but the sinful manifestation is sinful because it is rooted in the sin of Adam and Eve. They wanted to be like God. So connecting and rejecting, God, it's God's job to reject, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
People pleasing, that is seeking people's approval rather than God's. The arrogance, God can be arrogant. Look at what I've done, because He's God. But when we take on that arrogance, it's sin. The sin of Adam and Eve is they wanted to be like God. We can go all the way through. God is proud of His Son. God can be proud, but when we take on that, it's sin for us. And on. Judgmental God. So,
yeah, that's pretty interesting. I laugh a little bit because people are probably listening to these and going, "Well, I do that. Oh, well, I also do this other one."
Yeah,
and so, and you found that people kind of there's a you're more than one of these. There's one that you really, really, really are, and there's others that you can live out of or.
So what we care about when we do the process is what is your first, because that's really your dominant core motivator. But then we also care about what is second and what is last. We care about second because most people live out of second. So my second is creating. And I think for a long time I lived out of creating. And I've created a fair number of things. I mean, from this process to writing 3 books, to creating the wine business, and in some senses creating the Timothy Foundation. I'm not a stranger to creating, but I've realized when I live out of that, number one, it's draining energy for me, but number two, it's and more importantly, it's not my longest suit. It's not the best of who I am. I can do it, but it's not the best of who I am. I'll also tell you, when I hired someone to do my first website, I said to him, we can meet for 20 minutes at a time and no longer, because my attention span for this, I cannot do it. I just can't. And we're building a new website for the wine business right now, and it's excruciating. And it's not them, it's me. I have a meeting with them on Monday, and I'm just dreading it.
Yeah.
Even though creating is my second.
Yeah, I think that's really maybe a good place for us to end on today, because I want people to be able to, have something that they can kind of latch their hat on. What would you say for folks who are, man, they're sitting at home, their mind is spinning, they're wondering who they are, maybe they're young, maybe they're not so young, but they're really trying to grapple with, okay, this is great, but an hour-long podcast is probably not help. This takes more than just reading as well. I mean, this takes really a guide, right? Yeah.
I wrote the book mostly for people who were never going to be able to afford to do the process. Mm-hmm. But it is self-surgery. So while it's there, it is self-surgery. Yeah, we will launch the new Vision for Your Life website. There'll be a new book, a second edition of the book, which will have a bunch of some of the things I've talked about here today that we've learned. And then there will be a new website where you will be able to engage a coach. You'll be able to take the online test. You'll be able to engage a coach and go from there. Hopefully that comes in the next 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, and we'll keep people posted. I'll update the show notes, I think, once that's out, and so people who are listening maybe 6 to 8 months from now will be able to find that. But Bob, grateful for your time. Thank you for thanks for just taking on projects like writing books and doing that. I mean, that really is scary. I don't think people realize that, but to put yourself out there in that way and sort of capture your ideas and say, here it is, world, take it or leave it, or and probably as a connecting person, that's even scarier somehow.
Yeah, it's I think the books have been Not something I ever, set out to do or thought, oh, that's what I'll do. But they were more have to. It's just, I have to. I'm working on a book right now on the life of David that I just have to do. I can't not do it, and it's not relational at all. It's sitting behind your computer. It's why it's taken me 2 years to work on this thing. But again, I just have to. Thank you for having me. Thank you for taking the time, and it's always great to see you. And it's a privilege to be a part of this.
Likewise. Well, listen, this has been another episode of In the Fire. We're continuing to look for great guests with great content to help you see how God's design for you impacts your walk in a daily and practical way. So if you have ideas or you want to recommend someone, my email's down below. Please click that. Let me know. The worst thing I can do is say no to you or maybe ignore you. But if I ignore you, it's because you ended up in the spam box. So just keep trying. But as always, we love you. We're so lucky to be able to minister to you and care for you. And we hope this is a blessing. Please share with anyone who you think it might bless as well. And until next week, this is Rob signing off from In the Fire. Take care.